panic, fear, anxiety. Oh my. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. But listen, these are really difficult emotions to experience, am I right? And whenever we feel a lot of pain, it is a natural human response to want to make that pain go away, not feel it anymore, would like for it to never happen again. And a common way to do that, or attempt to do that, is through avoidance. And listen, there is nothing wrong with a little bit of avoidance. However, when it's your only response or your go-to response, then you actually start to develop a fear or high level of distress at the very idea of feeling panic and anxiety. In other words, the more you avoid, the worse your panic and anxiety feels. So the work here becomes how to change your relationship with panic and anxiety. Because emotions do not go away. You cannot get rid of them. You can't fix them. And listen, panic and anxiety, sometimes it even serves a purpose. So you really don't want to get rid of them. You just want it to be less distressing, less scary. So what do I mean by avoidance? Avoidance is the attempt to find relief by feeling anything other than what you're feeling right now, because what you're feeling right now feels really awful. And here's a couple of examples of how one can avoid, such as working excessive hours or sleeping a ton, or the only form of entertainment is losing oneself in a book, or avoiding communication with others by not responding to a text or not checking your email, or substances. Drinking a ton of alcohol, for instance, can change the way that you feel really quickly, but then you're not present at all. And so what happens is you create this pattern of response, right? A habituated pattern where you're no longer present. You're no longer taking part of your own life or participating in life around you. The other thing that can happen is you can develop an implicit message or even explicit message of, I can't handle my panic and anxiety. And sometimes that can kind of bleed into other emotions or even life itself. It feels like life is too much. That is the potential of what can happen. And this is different from physical pain. Listen, you put your hand on a hot stove and you burn your hand, well, you don't want to touch the hot stove again. So in this case, this is where avoidance is a really useful method. So I'm going to teach you 4 different strategies on how you can stop avoiding and begin to change your relationship with panic and anxiety. Step number 1, because there's a strong physiological component that accompanies stress and anxiety, it can be confusing at first to understand what is causing this, medical versus emotional. And for any of you who've ever experienced panic attacks, I mean real panic attacks, you feel like you're gonna die. Very likely you have ended up in an emergency room. If they do all of the checks and they say, hey, there's nothing wrong with you, that becomes a diagnosis that is somatically or emotionally driven, right? That's your panic. And then you know that when you feel this, you don't need to go to the doctor. You actually need to start to change your relationship to experiencing these emotions. Step number 2 is acceptance. And listen, we really do not like acceptance, generally speaking. For a lot of us, that means that we've just got to roll over and take it. All right, bring it on, here it comes. However, it is a little bit different than that. And I have a whole other video explaining this in more detail, but here's the short explanation for now. It essentially means that you're acknowledging that you can't change something. You cannot change the fact that you have panic and anxiety. And once you make that acknowledgement, you're no longer fighting that reality, and that frees you up in order to make the changes necessary to make your situation better. Step number 3 is think about what's the benefit you will get when you're no longer avoiding. Maybe you find that you tend to avoid by investing yourself in a really good Netflix series. Again, nothing wrong with that. However, when you're investing most of your time by avoiding rather than facing life or facing some of these feelings, you may find that you're very unproductive. And so then your benefit will be, as you're no longer avoiding, you are then becoming more productive. Another really common way that we tend to avoid are social settings. And so by no longer avoiding, maybe then your benefit is you actually will say yes to that invite to a party, or you will go out there and make more friends or reconnect to more friends. And again, the benefit is going to be different for each one of you, but you think about how things will be better when you're no longer avoiding. And then you're going to take step 3 into step 4. Step 4 is that all emotions are temporary. All physical sensations connected to the emotions are also temporary. So what does that mean? that means it is not going to stay. So when you feel something really awful, you are not going to feel it always. An analogy a lot of therapists like to use is a wave. And if you think about a wave, some waves are more intense and they crest higher than others, yet they all come down. And a way that you can ride that wave, sorry, couldn't help myself again, is by using strategy number 3, your goal, your benefit of what you're going to get by staying with this and not avoiding. Again, when you're staying with this and you're riding that wave, it's really hard, right? That wave can get scary. It can get really intense. You don't know how high it's going to get, but you do know it's only going to get so high. And as you're riding that wave and it's getting really difficult, then you have that end goal in mind of what it's going to give you when you are no longer avoiding. What is that going to look like after you've ridden that wave? How good is that going to feel? And so again, because these emotions are so difficult to experience, this is not an easy process. And if you find that these steps are just too hard to do on your own, then know that there are many trained therapists out there that can guide you through this. Check out the links below for a few resources on how you can find those therapists. Take care.